Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a major constitutional clash that all went down in Portland, Oregon, over just one single, really intense weekend.
And that very question is at the heart of this fast-moving conflict we saw between the White House, state governments, and even the federal courts. So let's break this all down.
Okay, so first, let's set the scene. What was going on? Well, there were these ongoing protests in Portland, and they were getting a lot of attention, especially the ones happening around federal buildings. And that's what really caught the eye of the president.
The White House's official line was that they wanted to send in the National Guard to, quote, protect federal assets and personnel. Their public reasoning was all about restoring order. A spokesperson put it this way: the president was just using his lawful authority to protect federal property and staff from what they were calling violent riots.
Yeah, but Oregon, they saw things very, very differently. They immediately took the whole thing to court. Their argument was that this was a huge case of federal overreach, and, that it would actually make the situation on the ground way worse, not better.
And what's crazy is how fast everything happened. We're talking about a massive escalation over just 48 hours. Seriously, it played out like a high-stakes chess match, with the White House making a move and then the courts making a countermove, back and forth.
So, the court's first move, they issued what's called a temporary restraining order, or a TRO. Think of it as a legal stop sign, right? A way to pause everything until they can have a full hearing. And this first order, which came down on Saturday, was really specific. It blocked the use of Oregon's very own National Guard inside the state.
Okay, so now the administration is blocked. What do? Well, they tried to get creative. They came up with a workaround that was, let's just say, highly controversial.
And this really lays out their whole strategy. Step 1, deploy the Oregon National Guard. Nope, blocked. So, on to step 2. Reassign some California Guard troops who were already federalized. And they were even getting ready for step 3, which was to do the same thing with members of the Texas National Guard. They were really trying to find a way around that judge's order.
And here's the key detail about those 200 California Guard members. According to the Pentagon, this wasn't a new deployment. See, these troops were already federalized. They were under federal command for protests happening down in LA. So the plan was just to, redirect them. Move them from one city to a totally different city in a different state.
So how did the states and courts react to this little workaround? Well, the response was incredibly swift and really, really forceful. We're not just talking about angry press releases. California's leaders immediately jumped in and joined Oregon's lawsuit.
California's governor, Gavin Newsom, promised a legal fight. He called it a breathtaking abuse of power. He basically said, look, this isn't about public safety, it's about power. He framed it as the president using the military like a political weapon against American citizens.
And Oregon's Attorney General Dan Rayfield was right there with him. He accused the White House of playing a game, saying the president can't keep playing whack-a-mole with different states' guard units to get around court orders and the rule of law. Essentially, he's saying they're just trying to find loopholes.
So, in response to all of this, the judge, Corinne Immergut, came back late on Sunday with a much broader order. This new ruling blocked National Guard troops from any state from being deployed into Oregon. This pretty much shut down all the administration's plans, at least for a while, until a full hearing scheduled for October 17th.
So what you have is this incredible legal back and forth that created a really tense standoff in Portland. But it also kicked off this huge national debate, a much bigger conversation about the real limits of presidential power.
And this really breaks down the two core arguments, which are just polar opposites, right? On one side, you have the White House saying, hey, we have the lawful authority to protect our federal assets and our people. And on the other side, you have the governors accusing them of using the military as a reckless and authoritarian political weapon. Two totally different worlds.
And, this wasn't just happening in a vacuum in Portland. It's important to see the broader context here. That very same weekend, 300 National Guard troops were also authorized for Chicago. And the governor of Illinois? He made a very similar accusation, saying the White House was trying to manufacture a crisis. A lot of people pointed out that these deployments were focused on cities led by Democrats. And it was all happening not long after the president had designated Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. So, where does this all leave us? Well, this whole standoff leaves us with a really fundamental and, frankly, unresolved question about the balance of power in the United States. Where is the line between federal authority and states' rights? And maybe more importantly, who gets to decide where that line is drawn? That's a question the courts are going to be grappling with long after the dust settles in Portland.